Donald Trump's press conference in Helsinki was the most embarrassing performance by an American president I can think of. His preposterous efforts to talk his way out of his troubles made him seem even more absurd. But what has been obscured by this disastrous and humiliating performance is the other strain in Trump's Russia narrative. As he tweeted, "Our relationship with Russia has never been worse thanks to many years of U.S. foolishness and stupidity." Now, this is a serious issue worth taking seriously. The idea that Washington lost Russia has been around since the mid-1990s. I know because I was one of the people who made that case. I argued in 1998 that Washington was not ambitious enough in the aid it offered Russia, nor was it understanding enough of that country's security concerns. I continue to believe that George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton might have missed an opportunity to fundamentally transform Russia. But it has also become clear to me that there were many powerful reasons why U.S.-Russian relations might have been destined to deteriorate. Russia in the early 1990s was in a period of unusual weakness. It had lost not just its Soviet-era sphere of influence, but its 300-year-old Tsarist empire. Its economy was in freefall. Its society was collapsing. In this context, it watched as the United States expanded NATO, intervened against its allies in the Balkans, and criticized its efforts to stop Chechnya from seceding. From America's vantage point, locking in the security of the newly liberated countries of Eastern Europe was an urgent matter. It worried that the war in Yugoslavia was destabilizing Europe and producing a humanitarian nightmare. And the U.S. could not condone Russia's brutal wars in Chechnya, in which tens of thousands of civilians were killed and much of the region destroyed. In addition, by the late 1990s, Russia was moving away from a democratic path. The scholar Daniel Treisman has shown that by the mid-1990s, the combined tally for all liberal democratic reformers in Russia's Duma elections never went above 20%. The extreme opposition forces, by contrast, communist, hyper-nationalist, received about 35% on average. And once Putin came to power, the move toward illiberal democracy and then outright authoritarianism became unstoppable. An authoritarian Russia had even more areas of contention with the United States. Moscow panicked over the color revolutions, in which countries like Georgia and Ukraine became more democratic. It looked with consternation on the establishment of democracy in Iraq. And George W. Bush's freedom agenda might have seemed to Putin designed to dislodge his regime. Perhaps most crucially, by the mid-2000s, steadily rising oil prices had resulted in a doubling of per capita GDP, and cash was flowing into the Kremlin's coffers. A newly enriched Russia looked at its region with a much more assertive and ambitious gaze. And Putin, sitting atop the vertical of power he had created, began a serious effort to restore Russian influence and undermine the West and its democratic values. What has followed ever since, the interventions in Georgia and Ukraine, the alliance with Assad in Syria, the cyber attacks against Western countries, have all been in the service of that strategy. So yes, the West and America might have missed an opportunity to transform Russia in the early 1990s. We don't know if it would have worked, but what we do know is that there were darker forces growing in Russia from the beginning, that those forces took over the country almost 2 decades ago, and that since then, it is Russia that has chosen to become the principal foe of America and the American-created world order.